the crimson sand of Kepler-44 to be shifted beneath Mira Thorne's boots, as she approached the crystalline spires that had drawn her across 3 star systems. For 6 months, she'd been the only human on this desolate frontier world, documenting ruins that predated any known civilization. The structures defied explanation, translucent towers that caught the binary sunset and held the light like captured stars, their surfaces inscribed with patterns that seemed to shift when observed directly. Mira adjusted her field scanner, frowning. At the readings, the energy signatures made no sense. Whatever these ruins were, they weren't just ancient, they were actively responding to her presence. Each day she worked among them, the crystalline formations grew brighter, more complex patterns emerging in their depths like flowers blooming in fast forward. Day 184. She spoke into her voice recorder, brushing a strand of auburn hair from her sweat-dampened forehead. The artifacts continue to exhibit unprecedented behavior. It's almost as if they're trying to communicate. She paused, feeling foolish for what she was about to say. Sometimes I swear they're responding to my emotions. When I'm excited about a discovery, they pulse faster. When I'm frustrated, they dim. The sound of shifting sand made her freeze. In 6 months of solitude, she'd grown accustomed to the planet's natural sounds, the whisper of wind through the spires, the distant rumble of geological shifts. This was different, deliberate. The soft pad of footsteps. Mira's hand moved instinctively to the pulse pistol at her hip, though she'd never had cause to draw it. Slowly, she turned toward the sound and felt her breath catch in her throat. Standing between 2 of the smaller spires was a figure that belonged in dreams or nightmares, depending on one's perspective. Tall and ethereally thin, with skin that held the same translucent quality as the crystal structures around them. Their features were sharp, alien, beautiful in a way that made Mira's chest tighten with an emotion she couldn't name. Long, silver hair moved in a wind that didn't seem to touch anything else, and eyes like liquid starlight regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. The beings spoke, and their voice was like music played on instruments that shouldn't exist, complex harmonies that bypassed Mira's ears and resonated directly in her bones. She couldn't understand the words, but the meaning was clear enough. A question. Who are you? What are you doing here? I'm an archaeologist, Mira stammered, her hands raised to show she meant no harm. I'm studying these ruins. I didn't know anyone else was here. The alien tilted their head, those impossible eyes studying her with an intensity that made Mira feel transparent. When they spoke again, the words came haltingly, as if dredged up from some deep memory. You are human. It wasn't a question, but Mira nodded anyway. Yes, my name is Mira. Mira Thorne, Mira. The alien repeated her name, and somehow it sounded like poetry in their musical voice. I am. They paused, seeming to struggle with the human words. Zethara, these ruins. They are my peoples, were my peoples, your people. Mira's archaeological instincts kicked in, momentarily overriding her shock at first contact with an alien species, the Velthari. But the dating suggests these ruins are over 10,000 years old. Something flickered across Zethara's features, surprise, perhaps even respect. You know of the Velthari, only fragments, references in other archaeological sites. Your people were incredibly advanced, weren't they, before they disappeared? Mira gestured to the ruins around them. These structures, the technology required to create them, we did not disappear, Zethara said softly, moving closer to one of the spires. As they approached, the crystalline structure began to glow more brightly, patterns swirling in its depths like living things. We transcended, or so my people believe. Those who remained behind were considered flawed. There was pain in those musical tones, a loneliness that Mira recognized with startling clarity. She'd spent her career studying dead civilizations, feeling kinship with people separated from her by millennia. But this was different. This was someone who had been left behind by their own people, abandoned among the ruins of their former glory. Is that why you're here? Mira asked gently. Because you were left behind? Zethara's laugh was like wind chimes in a storm, beautiful and haunting. I was not left behind. I was cast out, exiled for the sin of finding beauty in what my people deemed primitive and worthless. What did you do? I studied humans. The admission came out like a confession. Your species, your culture, your art. My people view you as barely evolved beyond base matter, incapable of true thought or feeling. But I saw something else, something they refused to see. Mira felt heat rise in her cheeks, unsure whether to be offended or flattered. And that got you exiled, that. And my theory that human consciousness operates on frequencies that complement Velthari neural patterns in ways that could revolutionize our understanding of the universe itself. Zethara approached another spire, their hand hovering just above its surface. My people called it heretical, dangerous. They said I had been contaminated by prolonged exposure to primitive thought patterns. That's why the ruins respond to me. Mira breathed, understanding beginning to dawn. You said human consciousness operates on complementary frequencies. The ruins were built as amplifiers, Zethara confirmed, designed to enhance Velthari mental abilities, but they were never completed. The project was abandoned when my people achieved transcendence through other means. They turned to look at Mira, and there was wonder in their starlight eyes, but with a human mind to provide the missing frequencies, as if responding to their words. The spires around them began to pulse in synchrony, their light growing brighter with each beat. Mira gasped as she felt something awakening in her mind, not intrusion, but expansion. Colors she'd never seen before painted themselves across her vision. Sounds beyond human hearing whispered secrets in languages she somehow understood. What's happening to me? She whispered, but she wasn't afraid. The sensation was beautiful, like coming home to a place she'd never known she'd been searching for. The ruins are completing themselves, Zethara said, their voice filled with awe. With both our minds present, they can finally fulfill their original purpose. We are witnessing the birth of something new, a hybrid consciousness that transcends the limitations of either species alone. Mira reached out instinctively, her hand seeking Zethara's. The moment their fingers touched, the world exploded into light and sensation. She could feel Zethara's thoughts, their emotions, the deep well of loneliness that mirrored her own. But more than that, she could feel their wonder at her, their fascination with the way human minds worked, chaotic and intuitive, where Velthari consciousness was ordered and logical. This is impossible, Mira breathed, but she didn't let go of Zethara's hand. We're completely different species. We shouldn't be able to connect like this. Zethara's mental voice was warm with something that might have been affection. My people would say you're right. They would call this an abomination. But I have spent years studying human emotion, human creativity, human capacity for love. I know they are wrong. The ruins pulsed around them, responding to their joined consciousness with displays of light that would have been visible from orbit. Mira felt herself changing, expanding, becoming something more than she had been. But she also felt Zethara changing too, their rigid Velthari logic softening under the influence of human intuition and passion. What happens now? Mira asked, both aloud and through their strange new connection. Now, Zethara said, their alien features softening into something almost like a smile. We discover what the universe looks like through eyes that have never existed before. We learn what it means to be neither human nor Velthari, but something entirely new. As the twin suns set over the crystal spires, casting the ruins in shades of gold and crimson, Mira realized that her archaeological career had just taken an unprecedented turn. She'd come to study the past, but instead she'd found the future, a future that would challenge everything. Both species thought they knew about consciousness, connection, and the possibility of love across the vast distances between stars. The ruins sang around them, their crystalline voices raised in harmony for the first time in 10,000 years, celebrating not an ending, but a beginning. Part 2. The Exile Secreth Morning Light of Kepler-4 for Debi's twin suns streamed through the crystalline spires, casting prismatic rainbows across the chamber where Zethara had made their home. Mira woke slowly, her consciousness still adjusting to the strange new sensations that came from her connection to the Velthari exile. Even in sleep, she could feel Zethara's presence, a gentle warmth at the edge of her mind, like sunlight filtering through water. The disorientation will fade, Zethara said softly, not turning from where they stood before a wall covered in flowing script that seemed to write itself. Our neural pathways are still learning to accommodate each other. Mira sat up, studying her companion in the clear light of day. Zethara's appearance was even more striking now. Their skin held an inner luminescence that shifted with their emotions, currently a soft blue-green that spoke of contentment. They wore robes that seemed to be cut from the same crystalline material as the ruins, the fabric moving like liquid starlight. "How long have you been here?" Mira asked, rising to examine the self-writing wall. The script was beautiful, flowing like water frozen mid-cascade, but incomprehensible to her human eyes. 15 of your years, Zethara replied, their mental voice tinged with old sadness. "I was young when they cast me out, barely past the age of majority by Valthari standards. My research into human consciousness was deemed not just heretical, but dangerous to the very fabric of our transcended society." "What exactly did you discover that frightened them so much?" Zethara's hand moved to the wall, and the script began to glow, forming new patterns that hurt Mira's eyes to look at directly. "Your species possesses something my people lost in their pursuit of pure logic and transcendence, the ability to feel with such intensity that it literally reshapes reality at the quantum level. Human emotions aren't just biochemical reactions. They're a fundamental force of the universe." "That's impossible," Mira breathed, but even as she said it, she remembered how the ruins had responded to her feelings, growing brighter when she was excited, dimming when she was frustrated. "Is it?" Zethara turned to face her, their starlight eyes intense. "Think about your greatest artistic achievements, your most profound scientific breakthroughs. Don't they always come from moments of deep passion? Love, anger, wonder, grief, these aren't weaknesses to be overcome. They're the engines of creation itself." The wall behind them pulsed, and suddenly Mira could understand the script. It wasn't written in any conventional sense. It was pure meaning, flowing directly into her consciousness. She saw the history of the Valthari, their rise from a passionate, chaotic species much like humanity to the cool, logical beings they had become in their pursuit of perfection. "They achieved immortality," she whispered, reading the flowing histories. "Transcendence beyond physical form. But they gave up everything that made existence worth living." Zethara finished. "No art, no music, no love, only perfect, sterile logic. They exist in a state beyond emotion, beyond connection. They would call it paradise. I call it the death of the soul." Mira reached out, her fingers tracing the glowing script. "And you refused to undergo the transcendence." "I didn't just refuse, I proved it was unnecessary. I demonstrated that consciousness could evolve without abandoning passion, that logic and emotion could work in harmony rather than opposition." Zethara's skin shifted to deeper blues, colors that spoke of old anger and pain. "I showed them recordings of human achievements, your art, your music, your capacity for self-sacrifice in the name of love. I argued that true transcendence meant integrating all aspects of consciousness, not discarding the inconvenient ones. They didn't listen. They declared me contaminated, infected by primitive thought patterns. They said my continued presence would threaten the purity of their transcended state." Zethara's laugh was bitter, like crystals breaking. "So they stripped me of my rank, my access to their cities, my very name within their society. I became Zethara the corrupted, cast out to live among the ruins of our abandoned past." Mira felt Zethara's pain through their connection, a deep ache of rejection and loneliness that resonated with her own experiences. She'd always been an outsider herself, too passionate for academia, too theoretical for field work, never quite fitting into any of the neat categories her colleagues preferred. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it more deeply than words could convey. "To be rejected by your own people for seeing beauty where they saw only primitiveness. I can't imagine how that felt, can't you?" Zethara moved closer, their presence warm in Mira's mind. "You've spent your career studying dead civilizations because the living ones couldn't appreciate your vision. You see patterns and connections that others miss. You find meaning in fragments that others dismiss as worthless." The observation hit closer to home than Mira was comfortable with. "That's different. I chose my isolation, did you? Or did you simply accept it because fighting for acceptance seemed hopeless?" Zethara's hand found hers, and through their touch, Mira felt a flood of memories not her own, but Zethara's. She saw a younger version of the Valthari, standing before a council of transcended beings whose forms were barely visible, more concept than substance. She felt their crushing dismissal, their absolute certainty that emotion was a disease to be purged from enlightened consciousness. They couldn't understand, Zathara continued, that what they saw as contamination, I saw as completion, the missing piece that would make transcendence truly meaningful, rather than merely technically impressive. And now, Mira asked, after 15 years alone, do you still believe that? Zathara's skin shifted through a spectrum of colors: silver, hope, golden warmth, the deep purple of profound affection. More than ever, because you're here, because in you, I see the proof of everything I argued for. A mind that creates meaning from chaos, that finds beauty in abandonment, that bridges the gap between logic and passion without destroying either. The ruins around them began to hum, a low harmonic that seemed to emerge from the very walls. Mira realized that the crystalline structures weren't just responding to their emotions. They were amplifying them, creating a feedback loop that enhanced the connection between human and Velthari consciousness. This is what you were trying to show them, she said, understanding flooding through her. Not that humans were superior, but that we were complementary. That together, our species could achieve something neither could accomplish alone. The ruins were meant to be the first step, Zathara confirmed. A prototype for consciousness enhancement technology that would work with both Velthari and human neural patterns. But the project was abandoned when my people chose transcendence over integration. Mira felt the walls around them, sensing the vast potential locked within the crystalline matrix. What could they do? If they were completed, allow instantaneous communication across any distance, enable shared consciousness that preserves individual identity, create art that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously, bridge the gap between species so completely that the concept of alien becomes meaningless. Zathara's excitement was palpable, their skin cycling through brilliant whites and golds. With a human mind to provide the missing emotional frequencies, these ruins could become something unprecedented, a consciousness amplifier that doesn't strip away passion in the pursuit of power. Show me, Mira said impulsively. Show me what we could build together. Zathara's eyes widened. It would require complete neural integration, not just the surface connection we share now, but true joining of consciousness. The risks. What? Risks we might not be able to separate afterward. Our thoughts, our very identities, could become permanently intertwined. You would cease to be entirely human, just as I would cease to be entirely Velthari. We would become something new, something that has never existed before. Mira considered this, feeling the weight of the decision. Everything logical told her to be cautious, to study the technology more thoroughly, to understand the implications before proceeding. But deeper than logic, in the part of her that had always been drawn to mysteries and impossible possibilities, she knew her answer. My whole life, I've studied the past, she said. I've spent years learning about civilizations that rose and fell, achievements that turned to dust, connections that were lost to time. But this is a chance to create something that could last forever, to prove that the gap between species isn't a barrier, it's a bridge waiting to be built. Zathara's skin blazed with colors that had no human names, emotions too complex for any single species to contain. Are you certain? Once we begin, there will be no going back. I've never been more certain of anything, Mira replied, taking both of Zathara's hands in hers. Show me what the future looks like. As their fingers intertwined, the ruins around them erupted into light that could be seen from space, announcing to anyone watching that something unprecedented was beginning on the distant world of Kepler-4 to be, something that would challenge every assumption about consciousness, identity, and the infinite possibilities that emerged when love proved stronger than fear. The crystalline spires sang with voices that were neither human nor Velthari, but something entirely new, the first notes of a harmony that would reshape the galaxy itself. Part 3. The trader's Gambit. Jackson Reed's cargo freighter Wandering Star dropped out of hyperspace with the familiar shudder that meant his jump drive needed another expensive overhaul. He couldn't afford. The sight that greeted him through the cockpit's reinforced transparistyle made him forget all about mechanical problems. Kepler-440b was glowing, not the usual reddish gleam of reflected starlight, but actual luminescent spillers of crystalline light stretching up from the planets, surface like fingers reaching for the stars. In his 15 years of running cargo between the frontier worlds, Jackson had seen plenty of strange phenomena, but nothing like this. "What the hell happened down there?" he muttered. Checking his instruments, his cargo manifest showed a routine supply drop for the archaeological expedition, 6 months' worth of food, water recyclers, and research equipment for one Dr. Mira Thorne. Simple contract, decent pay, no complications. The light show below suggested complications had definitely arrived. Jackson was a practical man by necessity. Growing up on the outer rim colonies taught you to focus on what kept you alive and profitable. Keep your ship running, your cargo secure, and your mouth shut about things that weren't your business. But something about those impossible spires of light made his chest tight with an emotion he couldn't name. Wonder, maybe, or the kind of longing he usually tried to drink away in spaceport bars. His calm system crackled to life. "Incoming vessel, please identify yourself." The voice was human, female, familiar from their previous conversations, but there was something different about it now, a musical quality that made the words resonate in ways that bypassed his ears entirely. "This is Captain Jackson Reed aboard the Wandering Star," he replied, bringing his ship into a standard approach pattern. "I've got your supply drop, Dr. Thorne. Though I gotta say, your excavation site looks a lot more luminescent than when I left it 6 months ago." A pause, then, "Captain Reed, there have been some developments. Are you able to make planetfall at the following coordinates?" A stream of navigation data appeared on his screen, guiding him to a landing zone about 2 kilometers from the original dig site. "Everything okay down there, Doc? You sound different." Another pause, longer this time. "I'm better than okay, Captain. But I think it would be easier to show you than try to explain over comms." Jackson frowned as he guided his ship through the atmosphere. Mira Thorne had always been professional but distant during their previous dealings, brilliant, driven, but carrying the kind of loneliness that came from spending too much time with dead civilizations. Now her voice held warmth, excitement, and something else he couldn't quite identify. The landing was smooth despite his ship's protests, touching down on a crystalline platform that definitely hadn't been there 6 months ago. As the engines wound down, Jackson could see figures approaching through the cargo bay's external cameras. Dr. Thorne, recognizable despite changes he couldn't quite define, and someone else. Someone tall and ethereal and definitely not human. "Well," Jackson said to himself, checking that his sidearm was secure, "this just got interesting." The cargo bay doors cycled open, and Jackson got his first good look at Kepler-440b's new additions. The air itself seemed to shimmer with energy, and the crystal spires he'd seen from orbit rose around them like a forest of captured starlight. But it was the beings walking toward him that made his breath catch. Dr. Thorne looked like herself, but enhanced somehow. Her auburn hair seemed to catch light that wasn't there. Her green eyes held depths that spoke of visions beyond normal human perception. Beside her walked the most beautiful being Jackson had ever seen, tall and graceful with skin that shifted through subtle colors and eyes like liquid starlight. "Captain Reed," Dr. Thorne said, her smile radiant, "I'd like you to meet Zethara. They're the reason for all this." She gestured to the crystalline wonderland around them. Jackson touched his cap in greeting, his trader's instincts keeping his expression neutral despite his racing pulse. "Ma'am, sir, He looked at Zethara uncertainly. "Them pronouns are appropriate," Zethara said, their voice carrying those same musical harmonics that had changed Dr. Thorne's speech. "I am pleased to meet you, Captain Reed. Mira has spoken of you often. Has she now?" Jackson shot a glance at the archaeologist, noting the way she stood close to the alien, the casual intimacy of their proximity. "Well, I aim to provide reliable service. Speaking of which, I've got your supplies, though I'm guessing your needs might have changed somewhat." "Actually, we have a proposition for you," Dr. Thorne said. "Something that could benefit everyone involved." Jackson began unloading cargo containers, his movements automatic while his mind processed the situation. First contact with an alien species was supposed to involve protocols, government officials, military oversight. Instead, he was looking at what appeared to be a romantic relationship between a human archaeologist and a being whose very presence made the air hum with energy. "I'm listening," he said carefully. "We need someone to carry messages," Zethara explained, "to both our peoples. What we've discovered here, it could change everything. But old prejudices, old fears, they make direct communication impossible. We need an intermediary, someone trusted by humans, but not bound by their governmental restrictions. Someone with a fast ship and a flexible moral code," Dr. Thorne added with a knowing smile. Jackson paused in his unloading. "What kind of messages are we talking about? Because if this is some kind of invasion plan, the opposite." Zethara said, "We've proven that human and Velthari consciousness can not only coexist, but enhance each other. These ruins respond to both our neural patterns, creating possibilities neither species could achieve alone. But my people view humans as primitive, while yours fear us as threats. Someone needs to show them both that cooperation is not only possible, but beneficial. And why should I get involved in interspecies diplomacy? I'm a cargo hauler, not an ambassador." Dr. Thorne stepped closer, and Jackson noticed that she seemed to glow slightly, as if lit from within. "Because you've seen things, Captain. You've traveled to worlds where different species work together, trade together, sometimes even love together. You understand that the universe is bigger and stranger than any one perspective can encompass." She was right, though Jackson wasn't sure how. She knew about his experiences on the Rim worlds, places where human and non-human had learned to coexist out of necessity, where survival mattered more than species purity. "What's in it for me?" he asked bluntly. "Access to Velthari technology," Zethara said. "Drive systems that could cut your travel time by 90%. Cargo compression fields that would increase your capacity tenfold. Navigation computers that could map hyperspace routes no human has ever discovered." Jackson felt his pulse quicken. Technology like that would revolutionize independent trading, make him wealthy beyond imagination. But he'd learned to be suspicious of deals that seemed too good to be true. "And the catch? You'd be carrying a passenger," Dr. Thorne said. "Zethara's friend, Nixilla. She's been monitoring our work from orbit. But she needs to return to Velthari space to present our findings to their council. She also needs to understand human culture better, see your worlds through human eyes. Another alien, on my ship, she's..." Zethara paused, their skin shifting through subtle blues and greens, curious about humans, perhaps too curious for her own good, but she's also brilliant, kind, and completely committed to bridging the gap between our peoples. Something in their tone suggested deeper currents, and Jackson found himself intrigued despite his caution. "When do I meet her?" The answer came from above as a sleek, impossible craft descended from the sky with silent grace. It was clearly Velthari. Construction all flowing curves and crystalline surfaces that seemed to bend light around them. As it settled onto the platform beside Jackson's battered freighter, the contrast was almost comical. A hatch irised open, and another figure emerged. Where Zethara was tall and ethereal, this newcomer was more compact, their movements quick and precise. Their skin held warmer tones, golds and coppers that shifted like living metal, and their eyes were the deep violet of nebulae seen from a distance. "This is Nixilla," Zethara said as the newcomer approached. "NYX. This is Captain Jackson Reed." Nixilla studied him with unconcealed curiosity, circling him like a scientist examining a fascinating specimen. When she spoke, her voice held the same musical quality as Zethara's, but with undertones that reminded Jackson of wind through ship rigging. "You're smaller than I expected," she said bluntly. "And your ship, it's held together with determination. And what humans call spit and prayers, isn't it?" Jackson bristled. "My ship has never failed to complete a contract." "I meant no offense," Nixilla said, her skin shifting to apologetic blues. "I find human ingenuity fascinating. The way you accomplish so much with such limited resources, it's actually quite remarkable." There was genuine admiration in her voice, and Jackson found his irritation fading. "Well, when you can't afford the best equipment, you learn to make do with what you have." "Exactly." Nixilla's enthusiasm was infectious, her skin brightening. With excitement, that's what my people don't understand about humans. They see your technology as primitive, your methods as inefficient, but they miss the creativity, the innovation born from necessity. I've been stunned. Part 4. The Diplomat's Choice. Ambassador Thane Blackwood stood at the observation deck of the diplomatic vessel Concordia, watching Kepler-4 grow larger in the viewport with each passing hour. The planet's surface still pulsed with those impossible, crystalline lights, and every sensor reading his staff had taken defied conventional physics. Whatever had happened down there in the 6 months since Dr. Thorne's last official report, it had attracted the attention of both the Colonial Council and the military brass. At 42, Thane had built his career on reading between the lines of incomplete reports and managing situations that threatened to spiral beyond diplomatic control. The fragmentary messages they'd received from Captain Reed's traitor network painted a picture that should have been impossible: functional alien technology, successful first contact, and claims of some kind of consciousness-sharing breakthrough. That made the xenobiology department sound like they were describing magic rather than science. "Sir," his aide, Lieutenant Chen, approached with another data pad. "We're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. It's unusual." Thane accepted the pad, noting Chen's carefully neutral expression. In diplomatic circles, unusual was often code for potentially catastrophic. The message was brief but signed by Dr. Thorne with authentication codes that checked out against colonial databases. Ambassador Blackwood, request immediate meeting to discuss peaceful first contact protocols. Situation stable but requires delicate handling. Please come alone to attached coordinates. Critical that you understand context before official proceedings begin. Dr. M. Thorne, Archaeological Division alone. Chen frowned at the message. "Sir, protocol clearly states that first contact situations require full diplomatic teams and military escort." Thane studied the coordinates, noting they were several kilometers from the original dig site. "Protocol assumes we're dealing with unknown hostile entities, Lieutenant. Dr. Thorne is a respected scientist, and her message suggests we're looking at something more complex than a standard first contact scenario." What he didn't tell Chen was that those coordinates were familiar. 20 years ago, as a young graduate student in xenoarchaeology, Thane had spent a summer working with Dr. Elena Vasquez on Valthari site analysis. Elena had been his mentor, his colleague, and briefly, his lover before their careers pulled them in different directions. She'd gone on to become one of the leading experts on pre-transcendence Valthari culture, before disappearing during a research expedition to an uncharted system. The coordinates Dr. Thorne had sent matched Elena's last known location. "Prepare a shuttle," Thane ordered. "I'm going down to assess the situation personally, sir." "I really must protest," noted and overruled. "If this goes badly, you have full authority to contact the fleet and recommend whatever action you deem appropriate." Thane handed back the data pad. "But something tells me that whatever is happening down there, it's not going to be solved by gunboat diplomacy." The shuttle ride through Kepler-4's atmosphere was unlike anything in Thane's considerable experience. The crystalline spires rose around them like a forest of captured starlight, their surfaces rippling with patterns that seemed almost organic. As they descended toward the landing coordinates, Thane could see figures waiting for them, human and decidedly non-human shapes standing together in what appeared to be easy companionship rather than tense confrontation. Dr. Thorne was there, looking remarkably well for someone who'd been isolated on a frontier world for over a year. Beside her stood a being that could only be Valthari, tall, graceful, with the translucent skin and flowing features that matched historical descriptions. But there were others too. A man in trader's clothing standing close to another Valthari, whose skin seemed to shift through metallic hues, and at the back of the group, a figure in academic robes who made Thane's breath catch in his throat. Elena, 20 years older, her dark hair now streaked with silver, but unmistakably the woman who had taught him that alien cultures weren't obstacles to be overcome, but puzzles to be understood with patience and empathy. "Ambassador Blackwood." Dr. Thorne stepped forward as his shuttle touched down. "Thank you for coming. I know the situation must seem irregular. That's one word for it. Thane replied, his diplomatic training keeping his voice level despite the emotional upheaval of seeing Elena. Again, I take it you've been successful in establishing communication with our visitors? More successful than we ever imagined possible, said the Velthari beside Dr. Thorne. I am Zethara. This is my companion Nixilla, and our human friends Jackson. And Elena. Elena stepped forward, her smile warm but cautious. Hello, Thane, it's been a long time. Elena. He struggled to maintain professional composure. The Colonial Council listed you as missing, presumed dead. When your expedition to the Terminus Reach went silent, I found what I was looking for, she said simply. And it changed everything I thought I knew about Velthari culture, about consciousness itself, about the possibilities that exist when different species work together. Instead of maintaining artificial barriers, Dr. Thorne gestured toward the crystal spires around them. Ambassador, what you're seeing here isn't just alien technology. It's a synthesis of human and Velthari consciousness that has created something entirely new. These ruins were designed as amplifiers, meant to enhance mental abilities through cooperation rather than dominance. And it works, added the trader Jackson. According to the Velthari's introduction, I've seen what they can do together. Things that neither species could accomplish alone. Art, music, technology that responds to thought and emotion. Thane walked among the group, his trained eye noting the easy familiarity between the species, the way they stood close together, the subtle signs of relationships that transcended mere diplomatic cooperation. I see, and I take it this discovery has implications beyond pure research. The Velthari Transcendence Council is meeting in 3 days, Nixilla said, her voice carrying those strange harmonic overtones that seemed to resonate in his bones. They're debating whether to make formal contact with humanity or to declare your species a potential threat to their evolved state. Meanwhile, Elena continued, the colonial military is mobilizing a first contact fleet that assumes any alien civilization capable of interstellar travel must be inherently hostile. Both sides are preparing for conflict based on fear and misunderstanding. Thane felt the familiar weight of impossible decisions settling on his shoulders. And you want me to do what, exactly? Single-handedly prevent an interstellar war? We want you to see the truth, Dr. Thorne said, to understand what's possible when consciousness expands beyond the boundaries of species, when love proves stronger than prejudice. She took the hand of the Velthari beside her, and Thane watched in amazement as the crystal spires around them pulsed with soft light, responding to their joined emotions. It was beautiful, impossible, and utterly unprecedented in human diplomatic experience. Love? He asked, though the evidence was clear in the way the pairs stood together. Human and Velthari forming bonds that defied every xenobiological theory about species compatibility. Love, Elena confirmed, and there was something in her voice that made Thane look at her more carefully. Her eyes held depths that spoke of experiences beyond normal human perception, and when she moved, there was a grace that seemed almost Velthari in its fluidity. The consciousness-sharing process that changes you, Thane, not your fundamental identity, but your capacity to understand, to feel, to connect with others. Elena, what exactly happened to you out there? She smiled, and for a moment he saw the young woman who had taught him to see beauty in alien art forms, meaning in cultural practices that seemed bizarre to human sensibilities. I found a Velthari research station, a place where scientists were studying human culture, trying to understand why we accomplished so much with such apparent inefficiency. I was captured, but instead of being treated as a prisoner, I was welcomed as a colleague, and I fell in love with their lead researcher, a being named Kethaval who saw in human consciousness the missing piece that could complete Velthari understanding of the universe. We worked together for months, sharing not just knowledge but thoughts, emotions, the very essence of what makes us who we are. Thane felt something cold settle in his stomach. Where is this Kethaval now? Elena's expression grew sad. They chose transcendence rather than face exile for loving a human. But not before showing me what was possible, what we could build together, if both our species could overcome their fear of the unknown. She's been working with us ever since, Zethara added. helping to bridge the gap between human and Velthari understanding. Her insights have been invaluable in proving that consciousness sharing doesn't diminish either partner, it enhances both. Thane studied the group before him, noting the way they interacted with each other. The casual intimacy that spoke of shared experience is no single species could comprehend. Part of him, the diplomat trained to see threats and opportunities, recognized the incredible potential of what they'd discovered. But another part, the part that remembered loving Elena 20 years ago, felt something that might have been jealousy or loss. "What do you need from me?" he asked finally. "Time," Dr. Thorne said. "Time to demonstrate that cooperation is." Part 5. The Unity Awakened. Velthari High Council chamber existed in a space between dimensions, a crystalline sphere suspended in the void where the transcended minds of the oldest civilization in the galaxy gathered to contemplate matters of cosmic significance. Today, for the first time in 10,000 years, the chamber hummed with something approaching emotion as the council debated whether humanity represented an opportunity or a threat to their perfected existence. Zethara stood in the center of the sphere, their form solid and substantial among the barely visible outlines of the transcended council members. Beside them, Ambassador Blackwood maintained diplomatic composure despite the overwhelming alienness of their surroundings, while Dr. Thorne and the others waited in a nearby antechamber, their presence a controversial breach of protocol that had taken all of Zethara's influence to range. "You ask us to consider alliance with primitives," spoke Council Prime Velthic, their voice like wind through dead leaves. "Beings whose consciousness flickers like candle flames, whose emotions cloud their judgment, whose very existence threatens the purity of our transcended state. I ask you to consider evolution," Zethara replied, their own voice carrying harmonics that spoke of conviction and hope. "The humans have shown us that consciousness without passion is not transcendence, it is stagnation. They create beauty from chaos, meaning from suffering, love from differences that should be insurmountable." The chamber pulsed with colors that had no names, reflecting the council's conflicted thoughts. Some members had observed the reports from Kepler-4 to be with scientific curiosity, while others viewed the consciousness-sharing experiments as contamination that threatened everything they had achieved. "You speak of love," said another council member, their tone carrying millennia of disdain. "A primitive biological imperative that we transcended when we shed our base matter. These humans have corrupted you, child of our lineage. They have made you regress to instincts we evolved beyond eons ago. Have they?" Zethara gestured, and the chamber's walls became transparent, revealing the space beyond where something impossible was taking place. Ambassador Blackwood gasped as he saw a massive structure materializing in the void. Around them, built from crystalline formations, identical to those on Kepler-4 to be, but on a scale that dwarfed star systems. As he watched, sections of the structure pulsed with light that seemed to respond to thoughts and emotions, broadcast from across the galaxy, creating patterns of such complexity and beauty that they hurt to perceive directly. "What is that?" he whispered. "The consciousness web," Zethara said. "A network of enhanced ruins scattered across 1,000 worlds, all connected through quantum entanglement and dimensional folding. My ancestors built it as their masterwork, a way to link every sentient mind in the galaxy in perfect harmony. Then why isn't it active?" Blackwood asked, noting that most of the massive structure remained dark and inert. "Because it requires emotional resonance to function," said a new voice, and everyone in the chamber turned as a figure materialized that should not have been able to exist. She appeared human at first glance, young, perhaps 25, with dark hair and eyes that held starlight. But as she moved, her form shifted subtly, sometimes revealing the translucent skin and flowing features of the Velthari, sometimes displaying other characteristics that belonged to no known species. Most unsettling of all, she seemed to exist in multiple temporal states simultaneously, her movements leaving ghost images that showed what she had been and what she might become. "Impossible," breathed Council Prime Velthic. "You are temporally displaced. You exist outside causality itself." "I am Kira Volt," the impossible being said, her voice carrying harmonics from both human and Velthari speech patterns while adding undertones that belonged to neither. I am the daughter of Mira, Thorn and Zethara, born 50 years in what you consider the future. I have come back to prevent a war that will destroy both our species and ensure that the love that created me has the chance to exist." The chamber erupted in chaos as council members struggled to comprehend what they were witnessing. Temporal manipulation was theoretically possible but practically forbidden. The risks to causality were considered too great for any responsible civilization to attempt. "You're a hybrid," Ambassador Blackwood said, his diplomatic training helping him focus on practical implications. "Human and Velthari genetics somehow combined." "Not genetics," Kira replied, her form shifting again to reveal aspects that were clearly neither human nor Velthari. "Consciousness itself can reproduce, evolve, create new forms of existence when different patterns merge in harmony rather than conflict. I am proof that love transcends biology, that unity creates possibilities neither species could achieve alone. And you've traveled back through time to prevent a war," Blackwood continued. "What war?" "The situation on Kepler-4 seems to be developing peacefully." Kira's expression grew sad, her form solidifying into something more recognizably human. "In my timeline, fear triumphs over hope. The Velthari Council declares humanity a threat to be eliminated before your emotional contamination can spread. Human military forces respond by attempting to destroy every Velthari installation they can locate. The war lasts 300 years and ends with both civilizations crippled. The galaxy plunged into dark ages that last millennia." "And how does your presence here change that outcome?" asked Velthic, though their tone had shifted from dismissal to cautious interest. "By activating the consciousness web," Kira said. "By proving that unity is not just possible but inevitable. Watch." She raised her hands, and suddenly every mind in the chamber was connected not through the cold perfection of Velthari transcendence, but through something warmer, more chaotic, infinitely more alive. Ambassador Blackwood felt his consciousness expand to encompass not just his own thoughts, but those of every council member, every human and Velthari on Kepler-4, every sentient being within the web's vast reach. He experienced the universe through Velthari senses that perceived dimensions humans had never imagined, felt the passionate creativity that drove human art and innovation, touched the minds of species he'd never known existed, all of it woven together in a symphony of consciousness that made individual identity seem like a single note, in an infinite composition. But more than that, he felt the love that connected them all, not the biological imperative the council dismissed, but something far more profound. The recognition that consciousness itself was precious, that every thinking being added something unique and irreplaceable to the cosmic symphony. That diversity was not a weakness to be overcome, but a strength to be celebrated. "This is what my parents discovered," Kira said, her voice now coming from everywhere and nowhere. "That consciousness is not a competition, but a collaboration. That the boundaries between species, between individual minds, are artificial constructs that limit, rather than protect us." The web responded to their joined thoughts, sections that had been dark for millennia blazing to life, as the network found the emotional resonance it needed to function. Across the galaxy, sentient beings felt a moment of perfect connection, a glimpse of what they could become if they chose unity over separation, the power requirements alone. One council member began, their scientific training asserting itself even in the face of the impossible, are minimal when consciousness provides the energy. Kira replied, "Love is the most potent force in the universe, not because of sentiment, but because it creates quantum entanglement between minds that transcends physical limitations. When beings choose connection over isolation, they become part of something greater while remaining essentially themselves." Ambassador Blackwood felt the truth of her words in every fiber of his being. The connection didn't diminish his humanity, it enhanced it, showing him aspects of his own consciousness he'd never known existed. He was still Thane Blackwood, still human, still committed to his diplomatic mission, but now he was also connected to every other mind in the web, able to feel their hopes and fears, their dreams and aspiration, their shared desire for meaning and purpose. "The choice is before you," Kira continued, her form beginning to fade as the temporal disturbance that had brought her back grew unstable. You can cling to the illusion of separation, maintain your artificial purity, and watch both our species destroy themselves in their fear of connection. Or you can choose evolution, not the cold perfection of transcendence, but the warm chaos of living consciousness, growing and changing, and becoming more than it ever imagined possible. And if we choose unity, asked Velthic, their voice heavy with the weight of decision, then I will exist. Kira said simply, my parents will find each other, love each other, create not just me but a new form of consciousness that bridges every gap between species. The web will awaken fully, connecting every sentient mind in the galaxy in perfect harmony, while preserving the beautiful diversity that makes each individual precious. The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. They were being asked to abandon everything they thought they knew about consciousness evolution and the proper relationship between species, but they were also being offered something unprecedented, the chance to be part of something larger than themselves, without losing what made them unique.